The quiet hum of a spacecraft filled the dark void of space as the Krull Hunters, a notorious alien mercenary squad, made their descent towards an unfamiliar planet. Known throughout the galaxy for their ruthless efficiency, they were feared by many for their unmatched combat skills. The Krull Hunters had never failed a mission, and they weren't about to start now. Their objective was clear: infiltrate and destroy a human military base that had been growing more powerful with each passing year. According to their employers, the Galactic Council, the base was now a major threat. The humans, once seen as insignificant, had suddenly become a rising force, one that needed to be eradicated before they posed a bigger danger to the galaxy. The mission seemed simple enough. The humans were technologically inferior, and their base was poorly guarded. The Krull Hunters had faced many challenges before, but nothing that even remotely compared to the might of their weapons and technology. With advanced cloaking systems and combat skills honed over centuries of war, they believed this would be another easy kill. As the mercenaries landed on the planet's surface, they could see the human base in the distance, a few kilometers away. Their weapons were primed, their armor gleaming in the dim light of the planet's twin moons, ready for the attack. But as they neared the base, something strange happened. The base was eerily silent. Not a single sound could be heard from the distant buildings. There were no guards, no movement in the shadows, no distant sounds of machinery or vehicles. It was as if the base had been abandoned. A deep sense of unease settled over the alien soldiers. They had expected to be met with resistance, but what they saw before them was an unsettling emptiness. Their leader, Zorak, narrowed his eyes, scanning the surroundings carefully. He was a tall, imposing figure, his armor sleek and intimidating. He waved his hand, signaling the squad to halt. Something wasn't right. This silence, this stillness, it was too perfect, too calculated. He motioned for two of his soldiers to move forward, their weapons raised, ready for anything. The rest of the squad followed cautiously, their movements quiet but deliberate. They advanced slowly, keeping their eyes peeled for any sign of danger. But the longer they went on, the more they began to feel the weight of the silence pressing down on them. Zorak's mind raced. Could it be a trap? Had the humans anticipated their arrival and set a trap to ensnare them? He motioned for his second-in-command, Tarek, to check the perimeter while he himself stayed at the forefront. The seconds stretched into minutes, each one more tense than the last. And just as the tension reached its peak, a sudden, loud sound broke through the silence. A sharp mechanical click, followed by a soft, whirring noise. Zorak's heart skipped a beat. The sound was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to send chills down his spine. It came from somewhere inside the vase. Before anyone could react, Zorak heard a voice. Soft, steady, almost too calm for the situation. Don't move. The voice echoed in the darkness, and it was human. Zorak's soldiers froze, their hands instinctively tightening around their weapons. The voice, though soft, carried a chilling authority, as though its owner knew exactly how to control the situation. And then, like a ghost in the night, a figure materialized from the shadows. A human soldier, cloaked in near invisibility, his form only partially visible due to the shimmering distortion of his cloak. His weapon was pointed directly at Zorak, the barrel of his gun glowing faintly in the darkness. Zorak's pulse quickened, but he held his ground. The human didn't move, didn't speak. He just stood there, his eyes hidden behind the visor of his helmet, waiting. Zorak, with his centuries of experience in combat, could sense something was terribly wrong. He had fought battles on hundreds of different worlds, but nothing had ever felt like this. His instincts told him to strike first, to attack, but his mind urged caution. The silence was overwhelming, and the tension, suffocating. As the seconds dragged on, Zorak glanced around at his squad. His soldiers were tense, their weapons still raised but their movements sluggish, almost uncertain. They were waiting for his command. But Zorak knew this wasn't an ordinary fight. The humans had done something he couldn't quite understand. They had set a trap, but it wasn't like anything he had ever seen before. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the moment broke. A sudden flash of light illuminated the area as cloaked human soldiers, one by one, materialized from the shadows. They moved with eerie precision, their armor glinting in the dim light, their weapons raised, ready to fire. Zorak and his soldiers barely had time to react before the humans launched their first assault. The air was filled with the sound of weapons firing, energy blasts cutting through the air. The Krell hunters, once so confident, now found themselves on the defensive. The humans didn't attack with brute force. Instead, they fought with strategy. Each human soldier seemed to know exactly where to strike, where to position themselves for the maximum advantage. Their movements were swift, calculated, and coordinated. Zorak could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on him. The humans weren't just fighting to defend their base, they were fighting to survive. And in that moment, it became clear to him that the tables had turned. For the first time in his long career, Zorak felt the sting of doubt. These weren't just any humans. These were special ops soldiers, trained, enhanced, and equipped with technology that even the Krall hunters hadn't anticipated. The humans had taken the fight to them, using tactics that left the Krall hunters scrambling to react. The hunters were no longer the predators. They were the prey. The Krell hunters, once so feared and confident, were now in full retreat. They had underestimated the humans, assuming their advanced technology would make the battle the quick and easy victory. But they had made a grave mistake. The humans had been ready for them. Cloaking technology, AI-assisted combat systems, hyper-advanced weapons, everything they needed to fight back against the most dangerous mercenaries in the galaxy. As the humans continued their assault, the Krall hunters scrambled to regroup. They realized now that their mission had been doomed from the start. They had underestimated the power of humanity, and now they would pay the price. In the chaos of the battle, Zorak's mind raced. This wasn't just a skirmish. It was the beginning of something much larger. The humans were no longer just a nuisance. They were a force to be reckoned with. And if he and his squad didn't find a way to escape soon, they would find themselves wiped out. The Krall hunters had never known fear. But now, for the first time, fear crept into their hearts. And as Zorak signaled for his soldiers to fall back, he knew one thing for certain. Humanity was no longer the weak species they had once thought them to be. The battle for the galaxy had just begun, and the Krall hunters had made their first deadly mistake. The battle had raged on for what felt like hours, though in reality, it had only been a few minutes. Zorak, the leader of the Krall hunters, had led his mercenary squad deep into the heart of the human military base, expecting a quick and easy victory. But now, as the intensity of the combat escalated, he found himself questioning every assumption he had ever made about humanity. The humans, unlike any adversary Zorak had ever faced, were relentless. Their strategy, their tactics, and their sheer will to fight were unlike anything the Krall hunters had encountered before. It was as though they were willing to sacrifice anything to ensure their survival. And it wasn't just the military advantage that Zorak noticed. It was the passion, the fierce determination, the unity of the human soldiers that stood in stark contrast to the cold, calculated precision of his own squad. Zorak had thought that the human soldiers were just pawns, weaklings with no real skill. But now he could see the true power of humanity. It wasn't just in their weapons or technology, it was in their hearts. The way they fought, the way they stood together, made him realize that the humans weren't just defending a military base. They were defending something much larger. They were fighting for their future. As the Krall hunters took cover behind the crumbling walls of the base, trying to regroup, Zorak's mind raced with options. He had seen his squad take down countless enemies with ease before, but now, every move seemed to be countered by the humans with terrifying accuracy. He needed to come up with a new plan, one that would allow them to overcome this unforeseen resistance. His thoughts were interrupted by the loud sound of a gunshot, a sound that cut through the chaos like a knife. Zorak's head snapped around, his eyes searching for the source of the shot. His gaze locked onto Bonner, a human soldier who had been relentlessly pursuing his squad with a determination that bordered on madness. Bonner was not the largest or most heavily armed of the humans, but his tenacity had made him one of the most dangerous. Zorak's eyes widened as he watched Bonner, covered in blood, charge straight at him with no regard for his own safety. He was running directly into the line of fire, his weapon raised in an almost suicidal attempt to stop the Krull hunters. Zorak's instincts screamed at him to shoot, to take down Bonner before he could do any more damage. But something inside him made him hesitate. There was a certain desperation in Bonner's actions, a desperation that spoke not of fear, but of something far more powerful: love. Bonner wasn't just fighting to protect his comrades. He was fighting for something greater than himself. Zorak could see it in the way his eyes burned with fury, in the way he moved with purpose, despite the heavy wounds that marred his body. Bonner wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to give his people a chance. And in that moment, Zorak realized that the humans weren't just defending their lives. They were fighting for their entire species. They had something to lose, something far more important than any war or battle. But Bonner's actions would come at a price. As he charged forward, he fired his weapon, forcing Zorak and his squad to take cover. The distraction was enough to allow a few of the human soldiers to flank the Krull hunters, catching them off guard. Bonner, in his final act of defiance, threw himself at Zorak with a roar, tackling him to the ground in a desperate attempt to incapacitate him. In that instant, Zorak's mind went blank. Bonner's body collided with his, the force of the impact knocking the air from his lungs. For a brief moment, Zorak found himself struggling beneath the human soldier, trying to push him off. But Bonner, in his final moments, gripped Zorak with a strength that belied his injuries. He was determined to keep fighting, determined to make sure that his squad had a chance to escape. Zorak's hand moved instinctively to his weapon, but before he could draw it, Bonner's body jerked violently as a blast of energy hit him from behind. The force of the blast sent him flying off Zorak, his body crashing to the ground with a sickening thud. The human soldier was dead. Zorak stared at the lifeless body of Bonner, his breath ragged in his chest. For the first time in his life, Zorak felt a pang of guilt, something he had never felt before. He had killed many, but never had he seen someone give their life so willingly. Bonner had not just been trying to survive. He had been trying to save the future of his people. Zorak had always thought that war was about power, about strength. But now, as he looked at Bonner's body, he realized that true power came from something far more profound. The Krull hunters had always been taught that victory was about domination. But Bonner's sacrifice showed Zorak that humanity's strength came from their unbreakable will to fight for something greater than themselves. It wasn't just about winning battles. It was about survival. It was about hope. And that, Zorak realized, was what made humanity so dangerous. The human soldiers, witnessing the sacrifice of their comrade, were consumed with a fierce anger. The loss of Bonner had ignited something within them, something that made them even more determined to push the Krull hunters back. Zorak could feel the shift in the air. The humans were no longer fighting just for their survival. They were fighting for justice. They were fighting to avenge Bonner, to ensure that his death meant something. Zorak stood tall, his mind whirling. He had never faced an enemy like this before. The Krull hunters were warriors, yes, but they lacked what the humans had: a cause worth dying for. It was clear to him now that this battle wasn't just about a military base. It was about the future of humanity itself. The humans were fighting to protect their way of life, their homes, their families, and their future. And Zorak could no longer ignore the truth. The Krull hunters were the aggressors in this fight. They were the invaders, the ones who had come to take everything from the humans. As the battle raged on, Zorak made a choice. He had come to this planet with a mission to destroy. But now, as he faced the raw, unyielding force of humanity, he saw the error of his ways. The humans had something worth fighting for, something the Crawl hunters would never understand. And for the first time, Zorak realized that his squad was no longer the hunter. It was the hunted. The realization hit him like a wave. Humanity had more to lose than the Crawl hunters. They were fighting not just for survival, but for the future of their entire species. Zorak's eyes narrowed. The battle wasn't over. But now, it had become more than just a fight. It was a test of survival, and it was a test that the Crawl hunters might not pass. The sound of blaster fire echoed through the abandoned base as Zorak and his Crawl hunters pulled back, their mission crumbling into a chaotic retreat. Zorak's heart pounded in his chest, the realization of what was happening dawning on him with terrifying clarity. He had never imagined that this mission would end in failure, never dreamed that the humans, the species he had written off as weak and insignificant, would force him to run. But now, as his squad scrambled to regroup, he knew they were fighting a losing battle. Retreat, Zorak bellowed, his voice cutting through the chaos like a command from the heavens. His mercenaries, battered and wounded, turned and ran, each of them desperately trying to put distance between themselves and the relentless human soldiers closing in from every angle. The Crawl hunters were formidable, but they had never encountered an enemy like this. The humans were using cloaking technology of their own, blending seamlessly with the environment, making them nearly invisible. And their tracking AI, it was unlike anything Zorak had ever seen. The human soldiers, once scattered and overwhelmed, had now become the hunters. They were everywhere, appearing out of thin air, launching attacks from all sides, cutting off every possible escape route. Zorak's mind raced as he tried to formulate a new plan, but every move he made was anticipated by the humans. Their eye was tracking his every move, countering his every strategy. They were closing in, and Zorak knew that unless they acted quickly, they would be wiped out. The sound of explosions filled the air as the humans unleashed an orbital bombardment. Zorak's eyes flicked upward, and he saw the flashing streaks of missiles descending from the sky, targeting the Crawl ships that had been positioned above the planet. One of the ships erupted in a blinding fireball as a missile struck its engines. The shockwave rippled through the air, sending debris and burning metal raining down from the heavens. The Crawl hunters had been relying on their superior technology, thinking it would give them the upper hand. But in that moment, Zorak realized that their technology had been surpassed by the humans. The humans had beaten them at their own game, outsmarting them with their cloaking devices and AI-enhanced tracking systems. It was a brutal wake-up call, a reminder that they were no longer the apex predators in this battle. "Get to the shuttle," Zorak shouted, his voice trained with urgency. His mercenaries scrambled, pushing through the smoke and debris to reach the escape route. Zorak's eyes scanned the battlefield, his mind calculating every move. They had to get out, or they would be destroyed along with their ships. The human soldiers were relentless, and he knew they wouldn't stop until every last Crawl hunter was either dead or captured. As Zorak sprinted toward the shuttle, the ground shook beneath his feet. The humans weren't just attacking from the ground. They had positioned their fleet in orbit, using orbital bombardment to pick off the Crawl ships one by one. Another explosion shook the ground, sending dust and rubble flying. Zorak's eyes widened as he realized that the humans weren't just fighting for survival. They were trying to wipe out every last Crawl hunter. He reached the shuttle, his team already loading up, and as he entered, he slammed the door shut. His mercenaries were gasping for breath, their faces drawn and exhausted. Zorak's mind raced. They had to get away. They had to escape before the humans could launch another attack. "Take us up," Zorak barked at the pilot. The shuttle's engines roared to life, and the vehicle shot into the sky, cutting through the smoke-filled atmosphere. Zorak didn't dare look back, knowing that the Crawl hunters were being pursued by the human soldiers who had tracked their every movement. The thought of being chased down and wiped out made Zorak's stomach churn. He wasn't about to let that happen. But even as the shuttle rose higher into the sky, A sense of dread gnawed at Zorak's gut. He had never felt fear like this before. For the first time, the Crawl hunters were the ones on the run. They had always been the ones doing the hunting, the ones who had always come out on top. But now, the tables had turned. The humans were the predators, and the Crawl hunters were the prey. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the shuttle's comm system. "Commander Zorak, we have a problem," the voice said, a panicked edge to it. Zorak's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" he demanded, his tone sharp. "We've been tracked," the voice replied. "They're cloaking devices. They've got us on radar. They're following us." Zorak's blood ran cold. The humans had tracked them even after they had escaped the base. They hadn't just beaten them on the ground. They had anticipated their every move, even as they fled into the sky. Zorak clenched his fists, his knuckles white with anger. This wasn't just a defeat. It was a humiliation. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Zorak ordered, his voice tight with frustration. The shuttle's pilot nodded, quickly adjusting the ship's course as they sped through the atmosphere, trying to shake off their pursuers. But it was no use. The humans were relentless, their tracking AI now locked onto the shuttle. As Zorak looked out the window, he saw a flash of light in the distance, a missile streaking through the sky, aimed directly at them. "Brace for impact," Zorak yelled, gripping the sides of his seat as the missile closed in. The shuttle jerked violently as the pilot swerved, narrowly avoiding the blast. But the missile wasn't alone. The humans had launched a whole barrage of missiles, and Zorak knew they didn't have much time left. As the shuttle swerved and dodged, Zorak's mind raced with calculations. He knew they couldn't outrun the humans, not for long. If they didn't find a way to shake off their pursuers soon, they would be caught. But then, as he glanced at the radar, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The escape route, once clear and safe, was now blocked by a new threat. The humans had anticipated their every move, even their retreat. Zorak's stomach twisted in dread as he realized that their path to safety was now a trap. "Deploy countermeasures," Zorak barked, but even as he said the words, he knew it was too late. The humans had beaten them at every turn. The shuttle jerked again as another missile slammed into the side, sending a shockwave through the vessel. The lights flickered, and Zorak felt a moment of helplessness, something he had never felt before. The Crawl hunters, once the most feared mercenaries in the galaxy, were now running for their lives, hunted by a species they had underestimated. And Zorak knew that this fight was far from over. The humans had shown that they were willing to do whatever it took to ensure their survival. And now, the Crawl hunters would have to live with the consequences of underestimating humanity's strength. With the shuttle spiraling into chaos, Zorak realized that their retreat had become the most dangerous part of their mission. The humans weren't just chasing them. They were out to destroy them completely. And as the shuttle shuddered under another blast, Zorak understood. They had no place to hide anymore. The roar of engines filled the void of space as the human fleet pursued the retreating Krell mercenaries. It was a high-speed chase, a dance of destruction as the two sides darted through the black expanse, the stars a distant blur. The Krell ships, once the predators of the galaxy, now found themselves the hunted. Zorak's heart pounded as he gripped the armrest of his command seat, staring at the holoscreen in front of him. His mind raced as the human fleet closed in, their ships faster, more precise, and more relentless than ever. The humans had set their sights on the Krall ships, and they weren't about to let them escape. Zorak had underestimated them. He had thought they were nothing more than primitive creatures with primitive technology. But now, in the heat of battle, he was painfully aware of how wrong he had been. Evasive maneuvers. Zorak barked, his voice strained with urgency. The Krell fleet responded immediately, veering to the left and right, weaving through asteroids and debris fields in an attempt to escape the human pursuit. But no matter how quickly they moved, the humans were always right behind them, anticipating every twist and turn. Their AI systems were outmatching the Krall's tactics at every turn, and no matter how hard Zorak tried, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were fighting a losing battle. The human ships were faster, their drones were deadlier, and their robots, those machines, half human and half robot, were everywhere. Zorak's mind reeled as he watched a series of robotic drones break off from the main human fleet, each one speeding toward the Krall ships with deadly precision. The drones unleashed barrages of missiles, each one finding its mark with terrifying accuracy. Zorak could see the destruction unfolding on his holoscreen. One of his ships, a heavily armored Krall destroyer, was hit square in the hull. The explosion sent shockwaves through the surrounding ships, and debris rained down, floating in the void. Zorak gritted his teeth as another ship disappeared from his radar, its lights flickering out as it was swallowed by the darkness of space. Zorak's mind flashed back to the moment he had first arrived at the human base, confident in the ease with which he and his team would destroy these insignificant creatures. Now, as he watched his fleet crumble under the relentless assault of the humans, he realized the truth. They were not the weaklings he had thought them to be. They had turned the tables on him, and now it was his turn to flee. Status report. Zorak barked at his communication officer. The officer's face was pale as he looked at the readout in front of him. Commander, we've lost contact with the rear fleet. They've been destroyed. And our lead ship, it's down to 20% hull integrity. We can't keep this up for long. Zorak clenched his fists, his mind racing. They couldn't afford to lose any more ships. They had to make it out alive. His instincts told him to keep running, to keep dodging and weaving through the asteroid field. But deep down, he knew it was futile. The humans were too fast, too intelligent, and their technology was too advanced. As if to emphasize this fact, a drone shot past the Krall flagship, its weapons locked onto the Krall vessel. The drone fired, and in a blinding flash, the Krall ship exploded, leaving nothing but a cloud of dust and debris in its wake. Zorak's heart sank. This was it. This was the end. But then something unexpected happened. As the last of the Krall ships attempted to escape, they were suddenly surrounded by human ships. 4, 5, no, 6 in total. Zorak's eyes widened as he realized that the humans had predicted their every move. Every twist, every turn, every attempt to escape had been anticipated by the human fleet. The humans weren't just chasing them. They were toying with them. Prepare to board, Zorak commanded, his voice growing colder. He had no intention of letting the humans take him alive. If he had to go down, he would go down fighting. But before Zorak could order the attack, his comm officer spoke up again. Commander, we have a live transmission. It's from one of the captured Krall ships. Zorak's brows furrowed. Put it through, he said, his voice steady, though his heart was racing. A holographic image flickered to life on the screen in front of him. It was a Krall soldier, a young one, bound and bruised. His eyes were wide with terror, and he seemed to be struggling to speak. Zorak, the soldier gasped, his voice trembling. They've already broken us. The humans, they've got everything. Our cloaking devices, our weapons, they've been hacking into our systems. We've lost. Zorak felt a chill run down his spine. The human fleet had not only destroyed his ships, they had infiltrated their systems, breaking through Krall defenses with ease. The young soldier's face was a mask of defeat, and Zorak knew that there was no way out now. They had been outwitted, outmanned, and overpowered. And for the first time in his life, Zorak felt the crushing weight of defeat. The humans had won. As the holoscreen flickered out, Zorak's mind raced. The human underdog nature, their relentless drive to survive against all odds, had led them to this moment. They had faced impossible odds and had come out victorious. They had shaped their destiny, forged it with their sweat, blood, and ingenuity. Zorak's gaze hardened. He may have been beaten, but he had learned something valuable that day. The humans were a force to be reckoned with. They were no longer a species to be underestimated. They had shown him their strength, their resolve. And now, as the last of his fleet was destroyed, Zorak realized that the future of the galaxy might not belong to the Krawl after all. It belonged to humanity. He turned to his officers, his voice cold and commanding. "Prepare for the final stand. We fight until the end." But deep down, he knew it was pointless. The chase was over. The humans had won. And Zorak was left to face the consequences of his underestimation of the species that had just shaped their future. The final showdown had arrived. Zorak's once proud fleet, now reduced to mere remnants, had been cornered in a secluded region of space. His last hope lay in the orbital defense station, a massive, heavily fortified installation capable of launching devastating attacks and withstanding almost any assault. Zorak knew this was his final chance. He couldn't afford to fail. If he was going to die, it would be on his terms, with a final, glorious battle. With his remaining mercenaries, Zorak entered the station's coordinates, preparing for his last stand. His ship, though battered and scarred from the earlier chase, was still operational. The damage had been immense, but Zorak had always believed that he could overcome any challenge, no matter the odds. This would be no different. As his ship closed in on the orbital station, he could see the outlines of human ships darting across the void, flanking him from all sides. Their precision was uncanny, their speed beyond anything he had anticipated. Zorak's mind raced. He had to buy time, to give his mercenaries a fighting chance, to hold off the human onslaught long enough to use the station's powerful defenses to strike back. But as he prepared to launch an attack, his systems began to glitch. His once reliable weapons were malfunctioning, and his shield systems flickered erratically. He cursed under his breath. The humans had already infiltrated his systems, just like before. They had anticipated his every move. Zorak's eyes narrowed as he watched the human fleet regrouping for the final push. It was clear now. They had him outmatched in every way. The odds were stacked against him, but he refused to give in without a fight. "Ready the final defense system," Zorak barked, his voice tinged with desperation. He was determined to go down fighting. But the humans had already outmaneuvered him. Without warning, a barrage of energy blasts erupted from the human ships, lighting up the dark expanse of space. The sheer power of their weapons shook Zorak's ship, and the screens in front of him flickered with warning signs. He punched the controls, trying to regain some semblance of control, but it was too late. The first wave of attacks hit his ship, and a deafening explosion rocked the hull. Zorak gritted his teeth, his hands clenched around the controls. He couldn't let this be the end. He had led his warriors to this point, and he would not die without making a mark. But then, another volley of energy blasts came from the human ships, this time aimed directly at the orbital station. Zorak's heart sank as he realized what they were doing. They weren't just targeting his ship, they were targeting the very heart of his last defense. The orbital station's shields flared up briefly before collapsing under the onslaught. It wasn't long before the station itself was engulfed in flames, its massive structure disintegrating into nothing more than a cloud of debris. Zorak's eyes widened in horror. The station had fallen. His last hope had been shattered. Desperation gripped him as he ordered the ship to launch its final counterattack. He had one last trick up his sleeve, an advanced missile system capable of breaking through even the toughest of defenses. But as he activated the system, he felt a sudden jolt. A powerful electromagnetic pulse sent out from the human ships disabled his targeting systems. The humans had anticipated this as well. Before Zorak could react, the final wave of attacks hit. The missile system exploded in a brilliant burst of light, sending shockwaves through the ship's hull. Zorak's ship, once a symbol of Krawl power, was torn apart. The cockpit shook violently as the ship's systems failed one by one, and Zorak knew there was no escape. With a final, defiant roar, Zorak's ship was consumed in the explosion. The debris scattered across the cold void of space, a silent testament to his failed ambition. The humans had won. As the dust settled, the human fleet regrouped. The battle was over, but there was no celebration. The survivors of the Krull mercenary squad had been either killed or captured, and the remnants of Zorek's ship were nothing more than floating wreckage. The humans had proven themselves once and for all as the true masters of the galaxy. On the bridge of the human flagship, Commander Rachel Thorpe stood silently, staring out at the remains of the battlefield. Her heart was heavy, but there was no time for mourning. The victory was hard-earned, but it was not the end. She knew this was just one battle in a much larger war. "This victory is a testament to the resilience of humanity," she said, her voice calm but filled with conviction. "But it's just the beginning." Her second-in-command, Captain Lucas Ramirez, turned to her, his face grim. "What do you mean, Commander?" Rachel's gaze hardened as she looked out at the stars. "The Krull are just one piece of the puzzle. We've won this battle, but there are others out there, other species, other factions who will see this as a challenge. The real war is coming." Her words hung in the air, a warning to all who could hear. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was no longer just a small, insignificant species in the corner of the universe. They had proven their strength, their resolve. But with that strength came a target on their backs. The universe was vast, and it was filled with enemies who would soon take notice of the humans' rise to power. The coming conflict would be unlike anything humanity had ever faced. But Rachel knew one thing for certain. Humanity had proven that they could survive, that they could fight back, and they would do whatever it took to defend their future. As the human fleet turned away from the wreckage of the Krull, Rachel's thoughts drifted to the future. The war was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The galaxy was on the brink of a new era, and humanity, for the first time in history, was at the center of it all. With that, the human fleet set its course toward the unknown, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The victory over the Krull mercenaries was just the beginning of something much larger. The battle for the future of the galaxy had only just begun.